This week, my light speed journey is going to be about Self Mettā. So I've just finished an online retreat. In fact, actually, the final session is happening right now in another online universe somewhere. But right now I'm feeling very blessed by that experience and kind of brimming with metta, including a great deal of metta for myself and a great sense of gratitude and because of some of the choices I've made and the opportunities I have. So I'll say more about that later. So let's have a quick look at the map for our latest hyperspace jump. So I am going to say something about the opposite of Self Mettā. Going to talk a little bit about bringing awareness and the importance of bringing awareness into our body. Also, how we can develop connection rather than isolation, and look at how conditionality, we can use that to help us with our views, and also how to develop contentment. So that's where we're going. Thank you, Sthiranāga. So if you're here last week for Padmavadra's inspiring talk, you'll have heard him say that he has no problem with Self Mettā. In fact, he has no problem with the first stage of the Mettā Bhavana either. But I do speak to lots of people who do struggle with this whole idea of loving themselves. And if they don't struggle with it directly, they can tend to sort of simply ignore it and almost leave it as the elephant in the room and go about loving others and their good friends, family, partners, and all of that. And all the time the elephant paces about, brooding and possibly making a mess of one kind of another. So I think it's quite important that we look to address it. So I'm going to start with the alternative. So what does it mean not to like yourself, not to wish yourself well, to believe you deserve the suffering that you experience? More importantly, what does it feel like? Well, in my experience, when I have a sense of annoyance, frustration, even anger at myself for something that I've done, or maybe something that I haven't done, something I've said, something that I haven't said, I feel a real sort of tightening in my body, specifically around my stomach and belly. And it's a contraction and it feels really personal. It's my pain, it's my suffering. And of course, what happens in this situation is that I feel a solidifying of my sense of self, and inevitably a need to protect that sense of self. And when that happens, it creates a more solid impression of the world out there, which leads me to feel a separation between myself and others, myself and the world. And that adds more discomfort and more suffering to my experience. We've just been talking in our group about that sense of contraction and the world, our world feeling smaller. And if I'm not careful, I can really start to dislike or even hate myself, particularly if I have this intuition that I'm somehow creating that situation, even whilst I'm unable to stop it or extricate myself from that predicament. So one way out of this is I suddenly realize actually it's not really my fault, it's somebody else's fault. And of course, many people are experiencing difficulty in this current lockdown. There are plenty of targets to aim our blame at. Those who allowed the virus to spread to humans, our government for reacting too slowly to close the borders, stop the spread, or for closing schools, or for imposing any sort of lockdown at all. So many views, so many people to blame. But actually, all we're doing in this situation is allowing that sense of self to harden even further, developing a stronger shell as we battle against whatever manifestation of other we come up against. So there are other ways. So the first way is, well, firstly, I'd say it relies on us having enough awareness, enough integration and knowledge of ourselves to be able to recognize the signs. So noticing those tightening patterns in our body and being able to find the gap between our habitual patterns of reaction before they come into play. So when we notice that discomfort, maybe it's caused by physical pain, maybe it's by illness, maybe we've just shouted at someone or sent a spiky email or text. Whatever it is, when we notice the physical sensation, we can pause and realize that we're not alone. We're not the only person to be experiencing bad hips, arthritis, a headache. We're not the only one who's raised our voice before thinking how it would feel to be on the receiving end of such energy. And when we know this, we can also know that we're not alone. And instead of separation, we start to feel a sense of connection, a sense of solidarity with others. And of course, this has the effect of expanding us, breaking down those barriers, or at least weakening them. Another way to approach this situation is to reflect on conditionality, not in a way that's looking for one reason. No effect has only one cause. Everything that happens is as a result of a myriad of conditions, each created by still more conditions. However, when we see that actions are the result of conditions, then we also realize that whilst we may regret the pokey email, when we look at everything else that was happening at that moment, then maybe we can realize that we're not solely to blame. And when we do this, forgiveness and love are the only responses that truly make sense. And one positive approach is to develop a sense of contentment with who we are and contentment with whatever situation we're in. But contentment can give the impression of being a bit lukewarm. And in Living with Kindness, Bhante describes contentment as an inherently active state with nothing of the resignation or passivity that is sometimes associated with it. He says that feeling metta for oneself is the cornerstone of contentment. And when you're contented, you can maintain your equanimity no matter in what circumstances you find yourself. So what's the key to developing contentment? Well, in my experience, it helps when I don't take myself so seriously, when I take my experience a little more lightly. I can enjoy what is enjoyable, and I definitely do that. But the trick is not to become attached to whatever pleasure I'm enjoying, and also not get overwhelmed when things don't go the way I expected or wanted. And that requires me to remember that both pleasures and pains of life are impermanent. So I hope that's given you some ideas of how to approach metta towards yourself. We've just got some time for my latest tip. And this week, I'm going to say something about gratitude. Sthiranāga. So there's lots of ways in which we can feel grateful, and all of them can have the important effect of opening us up to others in the world, watering those important seeds of metta. Firstly, there's gratitude in the very ordinary sense, really understanding just what's gone into some of the things that we experience. And when I used to go to schools and do assemblies, I'd often ask someone to call out what they had for breakfast. Cornflakes, someone would shout out. And then I'd keep asking questions. Where did they come from? The packet. How did the packet get into your house? My mum bought it from the shops, etc., etc. All the way back to the sun and rain creating conditions for the crops to grow. And what's important is that the things we take for granted have involved so many others. And a short period of reflection can really help to bring this to life. So secondly, we can feel gratitude for finding the Dharma. Maybe we feel some of our life choices could have been better. Maybe there are aspects of our life which are difficult, even painful, but we are here. We've found a true refuge, a real path out of suffering. Amongst the billions on the planet, we have found the Dharma. Thirdly, if we have a tendency to dwell on difficulties in our past, Maybe our family upbringing wasn't loving. Perhaps we were bullied at school. Maybe we were locked in a destructive relationship with an aggressive or violent partner. None of these situations seem conducive towards feeling gratitude. However, what qualities emerged from us, within us, in dealing with these and moving beyond them? What did we learn? We can feel grateful for that. Fourthly, we may be experiencing difficulties and challenges in our current life circumstances and situation. Maybe it's a person causing the difficulty. And we have the choice of closing down, creating that hard shell around ourselves, defending ourselves, creating separation and isolation. Or we could see this as an opportunity. What is this situation good for? How can we use it to expand and grow? And from that attitude, a sense of gratitude to that other person can begin to emerge, even though we find them difficult. So we might start to see more of them in terms of a larger awareness of them as a person. So experiment with gratitude. Making daily or regular gratitude lists can be a really good idea. Last thing at night, first thing in the morning, or at times of real difficulty. So when you have those, try and pause, come into the body, come into the breath, and count your blessings. You probably have many more than you realize.